morning, good afternoon, and good evening, and thank you for joining me here in Season 4 of the Logical Christian Podcast. I'm your Logical Christian, Dan Irwin. If you're here for what to think, you've come to the wrong place. I'll give you my view on current events, politics, science, religion, and whatever else from a logical, most importantly, a Christian worldview. But this is more about how to think. Don't just accept what you're told, ask questions and dig deep. Links for the material are in the notes if you'd like to follow along, and with that, let's go be logical Christians. Sure, I know, it's been a while. But let's not bicker and argue about who killed who, or about how long it's been and where I've been and what I've been doing. I'll cover all that at the end anyway. Let's focus on what's important. Angels and demons and Spaceballs, oh my! You know how the Bible is written to be a buffet? A choose-your-own-adventure book, if you will. How we're told to just eat the meat and spit out the bones. Believe and use what works for you, knowing that others believe and use it differently. You know that? You know how that's true? Yeah, look, that's what a lot of people believe. And if that describes you in any way, stop it. You're wrong, and you look and sound like a fool. On today's episode, first, we're going to try to overcome our spiritual phobia, and then we'll be scolded by a foul ball, and finally, where the heck have I been, and where the heck am I going? So for all that is holy, literally, for once in your life, could you please try to stop being such an istophobe? And then, when you get over being offended and scared, go grab your bat and ball glove, you might need it. Finally, get that hanky out of your back pocket and try not to ugly cry. Because, look, you can choose to believe this or not, but here we go. There are an estimated 130 million unique book titles in existence today. At least, that's what Google Assist tells me. Further claiming that millions of titles are being published every year. Today, you can literally become a published author if you write something and pay Amazon to be the publisher. Unless you want to pay for a book run, your book will generally be a print-to-order kind of thing, but you can be a published author. So to say that there are millions of books being published every year, it's probably true. A straw man argument, or the straw man fallacy, is the act of one party distorting the argument of another party in order to argue against what they'd like to argue against, rather than the actual argument. It could also be someone creating an issue or argument out of whole cloth in order to argue against something that's not even an issue. We've been seeing a massive amount of straw man arguments occurring in recent weeks with regard to illegal immigration. Argument: we need to remove those who are living in this country illegally, starting with the worst criminals. Straw man counter-argument: this country was built on immigrants. Why do you hate people from other countries? Or something stupid like that. The world of politics is fraught with straw man arguments. This is why we always seem deadlocked, because politician A posits an argument, and politician B twists the argument and presents a straw man counter-argument. Politician A then points out that B didn't argue the topic, then proceeds to twist what B said and argue a new straw man argument. Now, why would I tell you about book publication facts and straw man arguments? Tie these together, podcast man, you say. Well, found on theblaze.com, headline, Emasculated Gospel? Pastor warns Christians are neglecting critical part of Bible. And yes, as you've likely surmised, we're on Article 13 of Wounding Our Friends. This article is from May of 2025, so fairly recent. It's written by Billy Hallowell, who is a regular faith-based contributor to The Blaze. In fact, he used to be the faith and culture editor at Blaze Media, and he's a digital TV host and interviewer for FaithWire, CBN News. He's the co-host of CBN's Quick Start podcast. When I say he's a regular contributor, according to his bio, he's written over 14,000 stories on faith, culture, and politics in various publications. He's conducted hundreds of interviews and has authored 4 books of his own. I don't know of his personal profession of faith. Working for CBN, it doesn't really win him any points in my book, but let's just work under the assumption that he is a legitimately born-again Christian person. Really, it doesn't matter, because Hallowell isn't even that important with regard to this article. The actual focus of this article is a pastor from Tennessee, Alan Jackson, not the singer, a pastor. Apparently, Pastor Alan is a big deal. I have never personally heard of him, but I guess he's the pastor of the 15,000-person strong World Outreach Church and the 3 million plus per week Alan Jackson Ministries. So, I mean, he sounds fairly popular, I think we could say. Jackson is a graduate of Oral Roberts University, among others, which that would concern me a little. But that said, the church's Who We Are page sounds pretty solid. They're an interdenominational church, so not beholden to a conference or convention. That doesn't necessarily make them bad. So everything looks promising so far. Let's see what this article says and why I set this up the way that I did. Paragraph the first. Quote, Alan Jackson, pastor of World Outreach Church in Tennessee, is on a mission to get people thinking more deeply about angels, demons, and the supernatural. And, generally speaking, why? I mean, yes, they're part of the creation and they're part of our human world, but why is this a mission? Well, you'll never guess. Pastor Alan has a new book he's selling entitled Angels, Demons, and You. In a CBN interview, he stated that most of us have no problem with discussing angels and demons in the theoretical, but when we change the discussion to real, practical, and personal, it gets a lot harder. Quote, the most important part is imagining that there are spiritual forces that are impacting your life today without any question, and if we get to that point, then the discussion becomes pretty significant. And again I ask, exactly why? If I think, hey, there are angels out there, or I think, hey, there are demons out there, what should or what will I do differently because I'm thinking those things? His claim is apparently that since the Enlightenment era, which was basically the 1700s, plus a little bit on both ends of that century, we generally have lost touch with the spiritual side of our reality, only focusing on the dark and evil side when we actually do think about it. Jackson says that although that is one aspect, we want to remember that there are angels out there, spiritual beings that help us. In fact, if we don't include angels in our theological view, we just can't understand the gospel story. Now, to bolster his argument, he correctly states that Gabriel appeared to Zechariah as part of the John the Baptist narrative, that Gabriel visited Mary and Joseph, that angels ministered to Jesus after he was tempted by Satan in the wilderness, as well as in the Garden of Gethsemane prior to his crucifixion. He further states that even Satan knew the value of angels, tempting Jesus to throw himself from the top of the temple, and the angels would lift him up. His argument is that although most of us know of the interactions in the Bible with angels, today, and if he hasn't lost me by this point, he does now, quote, it seems to me we're more willing to trust in a presidential election than we are in the beings that God has made available to us. Okay, I mean, trust, when you say trust in a presidential election, for what exactly? Theologically? I mean, I hope that's wrong, especially since Donald Trump is an unregenerate, unrepentant, hell-bound sinner, as it stands right now. And what does he mean by saying we trust in an election but not the angels? Are we supposed to trust in angels? Because I don't recall reading that in the Bible. For that matter, what does he mean by the phrase, quote, beings that God has made available to us? Have angels been made available to us, and I was not informed? Is there a magic word? Shall I rub a lamp? In the Old Testament, the Hebrew word translated as angel is malach, and in the New Testament, the Greek word is angelos, right? Angelos, something like that. In both cases, the definition is something like sent one, or messenger, representative, something along those lines. Angels in the New Testament are generally, maybe always, created spiritual beings sent by God for some purpose. In the Old Testament, they could be that, or it could mean a theophany, an appearance of God, generally. Again, probably always a Christophany, which is a pre-incarnate appearance of Jesus Christ. The general way of knowing if the angel in the Old Testament is a created being or if it's Jesus is if the angel accepts worship or sacrifice. Only Jesus is worthy of accepting worship. The created angels will always tell the human to stop and worship God only. Nowhere in either definition of angel does it say that they are the servant of humankind, or something to be called upon, or even trusted in, for that matter. Angels are servants of God, to do as God wills, for His plans and His purposes. So like I said, this is where he really lost me. Now, I guarantee that CBN wouldn't push back on him, though, as they're a lot more charismatic or Pentecostal in nature, so this kind of thing would be right up their alley. The pastor goes on to say that we need to live like we actually believe the Bible is true. He said that we may feel like the supernatural is weird, so we avoid it. Quote, "There's also the element of uncertainty around issues like healing, which could further spark reluctance among some to fully engage in related conversation." This is kind of a mess, but again, right up the old address of CBN. I'm assuming he's speaking of supernatural healing, which I'm a full believer in. God can supernaturally heal anyone He so chooses. The reality is that He doesn't do it a lot, and never really has done it a lot from the history we have in the Bible. But He created us. He can heal us in any way He chooses. My guess is that Pastor Jackson is thinking more along the lines of us calling down supernatural healing on others. And I'm sorry, that's simply not a thing. We can pray, we can lay hands, we can anoint with oil. But if God chooses to heal, it's not because we did those things. It was His plan from the beginning of time to do that thing. We neither convinced God to do so, nor nagged Him into doing it, nor changed His mind. If we're changing God's mind, well, He's not much of a God, to be honest. Now, our prayers play a role in God's ultimate plan by His design. For instance, when God told Abraham to sacrifice Isaac, and Abraham was about to plunge the knife, God stopped him and said, quote, "Do not stretch out your hand against the boy and do nothing to him, for now I know that you fear God, since you have not withheld your son, your only one, from me." Did God not know if Abraham actually feared Him before that point? Did He require Abraham to commit to sacrificing his son in order to know for sure? No. Again, you got a pretty weak, clueless God if that's what you think of Him. That whole scenario was done for two main reasons, maybe more, but two that I point to. In the long term, this was a picture of the sacrifice of Christ by God the Father willing to sacrifice His Son fully capable of resisting or rebelling, willingly allowing Himself to be sacrificed. In the immediate, this was done for Abraham's and Isaac's sake. They both now understood their devotion to God, and they both now understood God's faithfulness to them. A theologian could state that much better than I did, but you get the idea. But Jackson says that Christians, quote, "must lean into Scripture and live out their beliefs. We have to be willing to walk this out and live like we believe the Bible is true. Otherwise, we just relegate it to an insurance policy at the end of our life. And if God can't be trusted to make a difference in my life today, then I think we're foolish to trust Him with our eternity." And see, this is a master's class in missing the point. You want God to make a difference in your life? Well, let me introduce you to salvation. Yes, salvation, miraculously, immediately moving you from a future eternity in hell, under the eternal unquenchable wrath of God, to an eternity in heaven to live in glory with God forever. Salvation, changing your affections from the world to God. Salvation, supernaturally wiping away an eternal debt of vile sin, placing the righteousness of Jesus on and around you, so that God the Father can actually look upon you as His child. Salvation, the greatest miracle known to man, greater than healing, greater than signs and wonders. Salvation, granted by God to a sinner dead and lifeless, unable to do anything to save himself. Yes, salvation too can be yours for the low, low price of repentance and belief. Nowhere in the process of salvation, in the gospel, is an angel or a demon, the belief in them, acknowledgement or trust in them, required. Now, I'd argue that the Bible is completely true, including the angels and demons, but belief in spiritual beings like that aren't required for salvation. Now, his premise is that these beings exist, and they affect our world. and I totally agree with that. I'd caution you in thinking they work autonomously, though. Remember, in the book of Job, we see that not even Satan is able to do anything that God doesn't allow him to. There is no reason to think that demons, generally speaking, are able to do whatever they desire. And angels are God's messengers. They obey God. Period. But Jackson gives us signs to look for. I guess. Quote, "For me, the trigger is when I watch something and there's not a rational explanation, when it's completely illogical, a set of behaviors, and then I think, okay, there's other components involved, and we've been watching some things, to me, that are pretty irrational, mutilating our kids, saying that biological sex is confusing. It really isn't." Okay, sure, I would say the demonic forces are in play here. Is it Satan? I don't know, maybe. Are demons forcing people to do things like this? To undergo irrational, illogical physical mutilation? No, I don't think so. Their power is an influence. And yes, I do believe that demonic possession is a real thing, to the point where the demon literally takes control of a body. I don't think that's the case with most general people. I think the bigger problem is Romans 1, quote, "Therefore God gave them over in the lust of their hearts to impurity, so that their bodies would be dishonored among them. For they exchanged the truth of God for a lie, and worshipped and served the creature, rather than the Creator, who is blessed forever. Amen." I think God has given a large portion of humanity over to their own desires, and being out from under the influence of God, so to speak, they're more open to demonic influence, so to speak. Now, our author states that Pastor Jackson believes, quote, "Christians are called to be culture shapers and not to rely entirely on politics for changes to unfold. Engaging, discussing, and understanding the supernatural are part of that key process." And as I do so many times, I've just got to ask, are we? Are Christians called to be culture shapers? See, I thought that because the world hated Jesus, they'll hate us too. Hard to shape the culture when those you're trying to shape, hate you. I thought we were to be in the world, but not to be of the world. I almost thought, for a brief, fleeting second, that we were supposed to do things like love God and love, protect, and provide for our families, and love our fellow Christians, and then love the rest of humanity. I thought we were supposed to tell the dying world, most of whom believe we're complete fools, about their only hope for salvation, regardless of the fact that we'll be mocked and ignored nearly all of the time. Now, unless I'm missing something, Christians are supposed to live as Christians, not focus on shaping the culture. Now, there are cases, like the United States, for instance, where Christian morals and principles shaped the nation for a time, and it still has some influence today, but that's not the norm, and that's not exactly what we're called to do. And to be honest, I don't know how believing in the reality of angels or demons has anything to do with shaping our culture. I really don't know how he tied that together. But Pastor Jackson does go on, quote, "I think we have emasculated the gospel, and we've been doing it in our formal education systems, and I had the privilege of studying in some celebrated academic settings, but most of them were pretty faithless, even in the theology schools." Again, what does this have to do with believing in angels or demons? Our author closes out this article with stating that Jackson believes we, quote, "have to be comfortable realizing Jesus himself clearly believed in angels and demons, and modern believers shouldn't be afraid of it." A pet peeve of mine. Could someone tell me why it is that every time we don't agree with fill in the blank, we're accused of being afraid of fill in the blank? Look, we're not homophobes. We're not transphobes. We're not scared of those people. We just know they're wrong. We're not afraid of Jesus believing that angels and demons exist, because most of us believe the same thing. And why would that make us afraid even if we didn't believe in them? This is a small straw man. I don't know about all that angel and demon stuff. Why are you afraid of what Jesus believed? Wow, it's a pretty big jump to say that people who aren't so sure about angels and demons must be living in fear. So if we jump back to the first paragraph, the premise of this article and Pastor Jackson's book, quote, "Alan Jackson, pastor of World Outreach Church in Tennessee, is on a mission to get people thinking more deeply about angels, demons, and the supernatural." And the question I posed, why? Neither angels nor demons really play that big of a part in the Bible, or relatively speaking. So looking up on my own and also asking Grok, that's X's AI chatbot, angels are mentioned about 300 times across the Old and New Testament, while demons are mentioned very little in the Old Testament and about 90 times in the New. But keep in mind, these are counts for how many times the words appear. If you look at passages or accounts, the number drops dramatically. According to GPT-4, there are a little over a dozen passages speaking of angels total in the Bible, and less than a dozen passages speaking about demons. Now, how accurate are all of these AI results? I don't know. I wouldn't call them 100% correct, but conceptually, there are just not many passages referring to angels and demons. They are important beings, especially angels, who do some very important tasks that we know of, but they aren't stressed in the Bible because the Bible, the gospel, is not about angels. Now that said, what do angels do for us? I have no idea. Do we have guardian angels? Maybe. I don't know. Are we able to summon or command angels? No. Should we speak to or pray to angels? Yeah, no, let's not do that. If angels played some sort of an interactive role with humans, especially at the beck and call of humans, we would have been told that in, you guessed it, in the Bible. But we're not told that. Turning our attention to demons, they're mentioned much less, and they matter to us much less. We know that demons exist. Demons have been given certain powers on this earth, still under the sovereign hand of God. But should we be casting out demons? No. Should we be speaking to demons? Oh, no. No, we shouldn't. Now, that said, we do know that demon possession can happen, and I have heard some very respected pastors state that they have been part of confronting demonically possessed individuals, but their exorcism wasn't like in the movies. It was preaching the gospel for hours or longer, prayer, and to the man, each of them said they never wanted to see it again. Now, that's the extreme. That's the exception for nearly all of us. For most of us, just don't worry about them. We don't need to confront demons. We don't need to talk to them or attempt to command them. Satan is mentioned about 100 times or so in the New and Old Testament combined. The devil, of course, is God's devil. The book of Job is all we need to know that Satan is given some license, but he does nothing God doesn't allow or ordain, depending on where you draw your boundaries. God's sovereignty doesn't stop at Satan. Satan isn't an equal but opposite force as compared to God. He's not an equal of Jesus. He's a fallen angel. Now, some think he was a fallen archangel. Some believe he was the angel over music in heaven. A lot of speculation. But clearly he was of some higher rank, whatever that means. And it doesn't matter, to be honest. Neither you nor I will ever encounter Satan. Or at least the odds are pretty close to zero. He's not a god. So he can only be in one place at any given time. He may be able to move at light speed, but still one place at a time. He's also not omniscient. He only knows what he's learned over time. He has no idea what you're thinking or doing unless a demon would report it to him, and I can't fathom a reason why Satan would care about what most of us are doing most of the time. Again, he's an angel. He's not God, so even if he did care, he doesn't have the capacity or even the time to get constant reports on all of the billions of humans on the planet today. So, all that said, should you address Satan or the devil? No. There's really no point. You can resist Satan and he will flee, except that he's not around you anyway, really. So you're actually resisting demonic forces, maybe, but you're also committing yourself to God. That's the other part of that one that we always skip. You can bind the devil all you want, except you're not actually doing anything. You're not binding anything. You simply don't have the ability or authority to do that. My proof is that how many billions of times per year is Satan bound by someone? And yet, he doesn't seem bound at all. So, with regard to Satan, there's no point in speaking to him, addressing him, or thinking you have authority over him, or to command angels to attack him, because none of that is real. You're not doing anything. So to sum up, we don't need to speak to angels, demons, or Satan. We don't have authority over angels, demons, or Satan, with very, very limited specific caveats. We know that angels, demons, and Satan exist. We know that they influence this world and life in various ways, as they're given leave to by God to do so, and that's really all. So why would Pastor Jackson write this book and put such an importance on this? Well, just the other day, Candace Cameron Bure, the Full House and Fuller House star, Kirk Cameron's sister, a professing Christian, made the headlines by talking about how even her family makes fun of her for trying to protect her family from demonic forces. Quote, like if you're watching this or you're playing this video game or whatever, that's a portal that could let stuff inside our home. I don't even want someone watching a scary movie in our house on the TV because to me, that's just a portal. Of course, entertainment and mainstream news believes her to be a crazy person, just a silly head. But now, is it a portal? Is she right? I don't know. And that's the problem we have. We can definitely say that if it's not true, honorable, just, pure, lovely, commendable, excellent, or worthy of praise, we probably shouldn't be focusing our attention on these things. That's not saying it's a demonic portal or that our salvation is at risk if we do give our attention to things that don't measure up. And thank God for that, because we'd all be out. It's saying that there's nothing profitable for us to do with this stuff. So, again, that doesn't make a demonic portal. I can tell you that meditation, like, say, Eastern meditation, where you clear your mind, and even the poorly named Christian meditation, those create portals for something to come in and fill that void in your mind. That's what spirit guides are. They're demonic forces that fill the void you've left for them by clearing your mind. That's a different topic. And like I said, that's the problem. We just don't have a great understanding of angels and demons with regard to this earth and humanity. So we feel like we need to figure it out. And that results in a lot, and I do mean a lot of books on angels and demons and the spirit world. But we're all working off of the same playbook, or at least we're supposed to be, right? The Bible? I'm sure you've heard of it. So what you've read and what I've read literally in the Bible is literally all we know about angels, demons, and the spirit world. That's it. And besides maybe some theological defining, some cross-referencing, and maybe some clarification done by some very learned men, there's nothing else to glean or learn or know. The rest that we find in all of these books or videos or sermons or whatever is just raw speculation. And in most cases, it's completely fabricated so-called insight. In other words, it's just works of fiction, with the little caveat of based on a true story. Now, I'm not saying that that's what this book is. I have no idea. Frankly, I don't care. If you want to simply consolidate and reprint what the Bible says, fine. If you want to make something up in order to try to sell books, hey, look, you do you, all right? Probably not going to win any points with God, but you do your thing. The problem I have with this pastor, the reason I started by speaking about a straw man, is because of the premise of why he said he wrote the book. Quote, the whole gospel story can't really be understood apart from the angelic involvement. Quote, we have to be willing to walk this out and live like we believe the Bible is true. Quote, it seems to me we're more willing to trust in a presidential election than we are in the beings that God has made available to us. His premise is that if we don't have some obsession with angels and demons like he does, then we can't possibly understand nor truly believe the Bible. The implication is that you're not a Christian, or at least you're a lesser Christian, unless you believe what he's telling you about angels and demons. He's created a problem that we don't believe in angels and demons like he does. Thus, we don't believe the Bible adequately. We don't understand the gospel. We're a somewhat lesser Christian. That's his straw man. And now with his accusation, his problem clearly stated, his solution to knock down his straw man is, buy my book. And once you buy his book, maybe even read it. Well, then you can be all you can be in the Lord's army. Finally, you'll possess some double secret knowledge about how we can trust in and apparently use, quote, the beings God made available to us. Listen, the spiritual world is real. We know it's real because the Bible tells us it's real. We know that angels, either as a pre-incarnate Jesus in the Old Testament or other angels in the Old and New, played an important part in history, specifically biblical history. We know that angels and demons play a role in life today. The spirit world isn't just sitting around twiddling their angelic thumbs. We know that angels are in heaven continually worshiping God. Beyond that, there's not much we know. Now, do we want to know? Well, sure. I mean, some do. Probably a lot do. Do we need to know any more than that? No. Do we have any indication that angels have been made available to us? No. I think you have to get really loose on interpretation to get there, especially to get there in our current existence. We know exactly the right amount of information about the spiritual world. You know how I know? Because that's all God told us. So unless you believe in a fallible God who screwed up his word that he gave to us, to know even one trivial thing more or one trivial thing less about the spirit world would be infinitely worse than what God has already seen fit to give us. The importance of angels or demons for us today is exactly what we read about them in the Bible. Very, very little. We, at almost no time, in almost no way, are to concern ourselves with the spiritual world. See, the Bible is about Jesus. The Old Testament points to Jesus. The New Testament Gospels reveal Jesus. The rest of the New Testament points back to Jesus. God the Father sends Jesus and accepts the willing sacrifice of Jesus. The Holy Spirit was sent by Jesus, helps us understand Jesus, and points us to Jesus. The angels and demons play a role in the narrative for our knowledge and understanding, and that's all. So my suggestion, probably stay away from any author who is writing a book on angels or demons, who makes some sort of a claim, like this pastor does, that we must trust in them in order to understand the gospel. If you're truly curious about angels, demons, and the devil, read your Bible. And sure, there are theologically solid books on those subjects, so search them out. Read those books, but not Pastor Alan Jackson's book. I mean, based on his own words, I'm saying that. Just don't search out or read his book. You know, you're so busy talking about these poor, pitiful, innocent, illegal aliens. Oh, well, sorry. Undocumented, criminal, illegal aliens. Better. You've taken your eye off the ball. The alien ball. Literally. I bet you didn't even know that found on theblaze.com headline, scientists studying artificial aerial sphere claim it came with a social justice message. Did you? You didn't know that. Yeah, no, you didn't know that at all. Well, travel with me, will you, to rural Colombia. Booga, Colombia, in fact. Now, I know you know where Booga is, but just for kicks, it's about 220 miles east of Bogota, Colombia, which would take you about 8 hours to drive, according to Google Maps. And since we're all just fooling ourselves thinking that we know where Bogota, Colombia is, well, that's about 3 hours and 45-minute flight straight south from Miami, Florida. That should give you some sort of a reference. So some alien sphere allegedly landed in Booga, or near Booga, and was confiscated by officials in order to study it. There's a video clip from May 1st of this year of this ball kind of hovering and floating to the earth, and a video of where it landed, as well as video of the scientists analyzing the alien orb. They say that it experienced a 10,000-volt shock, which apparently disabled it, causing it to fall to Earth. The scientists claim that the sphere is 4.5 pounds. It appears to be maybe 15 to 18 inches in diameter and was cold to the touch when it landed. They say it's not hollow, but the outer layer as well as the internals have varying densities, which account for the light weight. It appears, via radiology, to have a very less dense inner core surrounded by microspheres. It apparently has no welds, no fasteners, but looking at it, it appears to have a metal band around the circumference, at least I think, in which they say it has 32 elements distributed around this band. But the scientists say they see no signs of welding or other joining. Okay. They also say that it was observed just flying through the air with nothing that apparently propelled, guided, or was even attached to it at some point. It has some design and symbols on the front of it, so clearly it's alien. But don't worry, these scientists put AI to work deciphering the sphere, and as we know, AI is super intelligent because they told us it is. So what did AI translate these symbols into? Funny you should ask. Summed up, the claim is that it's a message about human consciousness and an eroding environment, because of course it is. Quote, "The origin of birth through union and energy in the cycle of transformation, meeting point of unity, expansion, and consciousness, individual consciousness." So what does that mean? No, try again. Rewind and try that again. No, not that either. No, that's just filthy. You shouldn't even be saying that. No, see, what it means, per the investigation team, is that it's, quote, "encouraging a collective shift in consciousness to help Mother Earth, especially considering the current issues with pollution and environmental decline." Makes perfect sense now, doesn't it? Doesn't it? According to the Daily Mail, the reporter who is reporting the story is one Jamie Mawson. He's apparently been a somewhat controversial reporter for some time now, starting in 2017 with the claim that he discovered alien mummies in Peru. Some of you might have remembered that one. Spoiler alert, no, he didn't. The Blaze article wraps up with the note that there was apparently a second sphere captured on video, again, allegedly in May, hovering and flying, sometimes faster, sometimes slower. No propulsion, no wings, no sound. So clearly these are alien pods of some sort. According to George M. Eberhardt, which this is a man of some age with an alleged occupation, I don't know, writing and submitting a paper entitled, quote, "UFOs and Intelligence, a Timeline," to CUFOS.org, that's C-U-F-O-S, the Center for UFO Studies.org, documented UFO sightings dating back to 597 AD, possibly 593. He went with 597. In Ireland, on June 9th of 597-ish, around midnight, some fishermen saw, quote, "an immense pillar of fire that ascended and lit up the eastern sky, quote, like the summer sun at noon." Boom, aliens. In 743, again in Ireland, according to multiple sources, ships with men aboard were seen floating in the air. Of course, as time went on, the story took on different details, moved locations, etc., but still, floating ships in the air, men on board. That was the original story, so, aliens. 776 AD, 2 red shields moving in the sky above a church in Germany. You'll never guess it. You guessed it, aliens. In 1440, a paper was published that said other worlds, including the moon and sun, could have life on them. In 1457, French theologian William Verlong agreed that there could be other planets with life on them, but Jesus only died for humans on Earth. God would have to address each world individually. We're now on page 3 of a 1,266-page anthology on UFO sightings. To give you an idea of what we're looking at here, page 1 and 2 encompass the first sightings up to 1000 AD. Page 3 gets us to 1500 AD. Page 4 gets us to 1600 AD. Page 5 through about the first half of page 7 contains 1600 through 1700. The rest of page 7 through page 11 gets us to 1800. Page 12 through 49 encompasses the 1800s. Of note, a period of January through July of 1897, many sightings were noted of some sort of airship floating in the skies all over the United States. And then we just get silly. Page 50 through 1069 chronicle the sightings of the 1900s. And from 2000 through June of 2025, we use pages 1070 to 1239. And now the accounts, as we move through the timeline, became more detailed and thus longer, and not all the dates noted were sightings. There were some miscellaneous related events that were included. In the 1980s, a top-secret military base, known on the Atomic Energy Commission maps as Area 51, became prominent in the news as a man who claimed to have worked there said the government was examining a recovered alien spacecraft there. In 2013, the government was forced to acknowledge the existence of Area 51, as a Freedom of Information Act request legally required the release of a formerly classified CIA document regarding the development of the U-2 spy plane and the A-12, as well as others. But only a few people care about, plane development in Area 51. People want to know about the aliens and the UFOs that the United States government has been experimenting on and gathering technological advancements from, etc., etc. What exactly are they hiding? In fact, back in 2019, a Facebook event was created and over 1 million people responded to storm Area 51. Some of you may remember that one, because they can't stop everyone. Of course, once it was made very, very clear that at best you'd be arrested and likely you'd be shot on sight, since this is a military base after all, the event kind of petered out. But the conspiracy theories abound due to the allegations made in the 1980s, the high levels of security at the base, the secretive nature of the base, and the general desire by people to, frankly, believe in aliens. Some of the top conspiracy theories are: an extraterrestrial ship crashed in Roswell, New Mexico in 1947 and was transported to Area 51 for investigation. The person in the 1980s, Bob Lazar, don't know, claimed that he worked near Area 51 and saw flying saucers in that area powered by Element 115, years before it was discovered by man. Extraterrestrials are being held hostage in Area 51. Again, Bob said he caught a glimpse through a small window of a, quote, small gray extraterrestrial between two men in lab coats. And alien autopsies have been conducted in Area 51. These aliens were, of course, the dead occupants of the crashed ship in 1947. Now, there are a few other fun, unrelated conspiracy theories. The government's black helicopters are housed in Area 51, and the government controls the weather from Area 51. So, alien floating orbs, floating sailing ships, floating airships, flying saucers, mysterious lights, impossible accelerations, decelerations, speeds, and maneuvers by alien-looking crafts, videos captured by military aircraft. These are all aliens. They have to be aliens, right? Well, maybe not right. See, found on theblaze.com, again, headline, Pentagon PSYOP exposed. Military reportedly cooked up tales of alien technology in weapons cover-up. In July of 2023, 14-year veteran Air Force intelligence officer and member of the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency, which I think we can all agree ranks at least at the top of our favorites of all of the geospatial agencies, David Grush blew the whistle, or more accurately made the claim, along with other Pentagon officials, that the Pentagon was covering up definitive proof of aliens and UAPs, formerly known as UFOs. He claimed that they had, quote, crashed crafts and, quote, non-human biologics, which could mean aliens or simply elements of life like proteins and the like. Grush made a number of very bold claims that were either blatant lies or implicated thousands of people over 50-plus years as being part of this massive cover-up. Not impossible, but highly implausible. Also in 2023, the Office for the Director of National Intelligence reported that the number of UAP sightings in 2022 had gone up from 2021, 501 versus 366 respectively, and that 171 of those 501 were those that had been reported to have, quote, demonstrated unusual flight characteristics or performance capabilities. Now, President Donald Trump, Season 2, said and promised a lot of things while on the campaign trail and shortly after he was elected. One topic of interest for many, many people was regarding UFOs, unidentified flying objects, or UAPs, unidentified anomalous phenomena. He claimed during an interview with Logan Paul in June of 2024, while he was still on the campaign trail, that he had access to the government files on this topic and that he speaks with people about this topic. In February 2025, the now official President Trump version 2.0, to the disdain of many, was reported as to be considering declassifying and releasing the top secret UFO research, as well as extend whistleblower protection to people willing to spill their guts about all things alien. As of today, I don't believe he's made good on signing an executive order to do that, so who knows if he will. I'm sure if he does, some activist judge will immediately place an injunction on the order because of something like interplanetary rights or something, I don't know. But back to our article. An office in the Pentagon, the AARO, All Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, has apparently reviewed all official government investigations into sightings since 1945. They looked at classified and declassified documents, as well as conducted numerous interviews as part of this investigation. They stated last year that they, quote, found no evidence that any U.S. government investigation, academic-sponsored research, or official review panel has confirmed that any sighting of a UAP represented extraterrestrial technology. They also found no evidence of any reverse engineering. But the Wall Street Journal said that the AARO was covering up some, quote, alien-themed psyops conducted by the military in their report. Specifically, they say that dating back to the 1950s, quote, the Pentagon apparently created and or nurtured false narratives concerning alien technology in order to protect man-made secret weapons projects to put America's adversaries off the trail of potential national security vulnerabilities, and in some cases, just to mess with newly assigned officers. In other words, the military made stuff up about aliens to throw everyone off their weapons and equipment trail, and the majority of the country says, no way, man, aliens are real, because that's what the data says. According to a Pew Research poll from 2021, so it's only going to be worse today, 2/3 of Americans then believed that aliens existed. What the AARO and Wall Street Journal have now done is buck up against decades of narratives pushing the idea that intelligent life on other planets, as well as alien spacecraft, exist. The general population isn't going to be easily swayed from their belief. The article states that the first director of the AARO, Sean Kirkpatrick, said he found that, quote, some military officials deeply held conviction that the military had special alien projects was the result of a bizarre hazing ritual. Essentially, new Air Force commanders of various classified programs were shown a picture of what was claimed to be a super advanced alien craft, telling them that they would be overseeing the reverse engineering of that craft, and were sworn to complete secrecy. But it wasn't true. This ritual apparently went on until Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin, overall an abject waste of space, ordered that the ritual was stopped. This hazing ritual went on for decades and was perpetrated on hundreds of people. In the 1980s, an Air Force colonel gave some of these fake photos to a bar owner at a bar near Area 51, who promptly put them on the walls. That further fueled the rumors of aliens, UFOs, and Area 51. This officer, now retired, told the AARO in 2023 that, quote, the purpose of the counter-information campaign was to mislead the world, particularly the Soviet Union, about what was actually being developed and tested at Area 51, the Lockheed F-117A stealth attack aircraft. Now, one specific instance was described in the article, coming from Sean Kilpatrick, from an instance in 1967. Summarized, at a nuclear missile base in Montana, the person overseeing the controls got a panicked, screaming, terrified call from the gate guard topside. There was a red, glowing, oval something or other that was above the front gate doing weird things. Quote, controlled maneuvers, such as flying very fast, coming to a dead stop, then reversing course and making 90-degree turns. Now, he was told to guard the base at all costs. Shortly after the phone call, the missile control systems all went dead. The order was to keep this incident completely classified, top secret. Kirkpatrick, who held his role in the AARO from July of 2022 to December of 2023, investigated and found that this was all due to an experiment done by our own government. This was apparently an experiment to see if the missile concrete bunker was fortified enough to protect against massive electromagnetic waves created by a nearby nuclear detonation. So they created a huge magnetic pulse generator and activated it on a platform 60 feet above the base. When they fired it up, it glowed. They transmitted the pulse down cables connected to the missile bunker, which disabled the controls. Now, this was one story, an interview done by the AARO, one of 24 interviews with current and former officials, scientists, and military contractors, as well as working through a large number of documents, which resulted in their report that the alien thing, this alien spacecraft thing, was nothing but a hoax perpetrated by our own government. And as one would expect, the Blaze article ends with keeping open the possibility of the existence of aliens from other planets, because of course it does. At this point in our history, they kinda have to, as the real nutcases are those of us who just don't believe in other intelligent beings in the universe. So what's the truth? Are there aliens? And the report that there's some government psyop meant to throw us, and more importantly our enemies, off the trail of the alien beings, the alien craft, and reverse engineering that's absolutely going on in Area 51 and others, under the strict observation and control of our government? Is that the way it is, or is the report accurate? And the psyop has actually been the decades of stories of aliens, crafts, and reverse engineering meant to throw us, and more importantly our enemies, off the trail of our latest military developments. Which one of those is true? Well, the general feeling by most people is that there just isn't a way in this universe, that a universe this size, this unknown, could only contain one planet that supports and contains life. There simply must be more out there. Even Christians generally feel that it would be silly to create this entire massive universe just to populate one single small planet in one galaxy, in one solar system, and that's all. Why make everything we know about, and so much we don't, to only put life on one planet, right? And it's an interesting question, but it's a question through human eyes. I mean, how big is this universe? Well, from what I found, the visible universe is about 93 billion light years across. Light travels about 5.88 trillion miles in 1 year, meaning that 93 billion times 5.88 trillion miles equals an error on most calculators. But it actually equals 5.5 times 10 to the 23 miles, which would be 5.5 sextillion miles. According to DuckDuckGo's AI search assistant, the fastest rocket in space is the Parker Solar Probe, which reached speeds upwards of 430,000 miles per hour. That's pretty fast. At that speed, it would take 144,074,256,236 millennia for it to travel the, and I want you to keep this in mind, the visible universe. We have no idea about what we don't know. You'd think that something this massive, this impressive, would be discussed at length in the Bible, that God, through the Holy Spirit, influencing the writers of the biblical text, would talk this creation up, would brag on himself over this massively huge universe. You'd think that, but no. Genesis 1:14-17, one of my favorite passages, especially verse 17, if I'm being honest, says, quote, "And God said, let there be lights in the firmaments of the heaven to divide the day from the night, and let them be for signs and for seasons and for days and years, and let them be for lights in the firmament of the heaven to give light upon the earth. And it was so. And God made two great lights, the greater light to rule the day and the lesser light to rule the night. And he made the stars also." See, he made the sun and the moon and, almost forgot, the entire universe. David in Psalm 8 says, quote, "When I look at your heavens, the work of your fingers, the moon and the stars which you have set in place, what is man that you are mindful of him, and the son of man that you care for him?" That at least speaks of the enormity of the universe that David could see at the time. And keep in mind, stars aren't twinkle, twinkle, little star. No, stars are suns, like our sun, except our sun is relatively small in comparison to a lot of them. Not all of those stars, those suns have a solar system of planets, like our sun does. That's right, that's a given, but a lot of them do. Those stars are massive suns, way, way out there, so they look like little twinkling lights. Now we hear in Isaiah and Psalms that God knows the names and numbers of every single star. The best guess as to how many stars exist in the universe ranges from 1 to 100 sextillion. We hear that God formed the heavens by a word from his mouth. We hear a few references about a few of the constellations in the visible nighttime sky in a few different places in the Bible. And that's all. So we need to start with doing our very best to view the universe as God views the universe, designed and created perfectly, with perfect purpose for God's glory and our good, but generally speaking, God does not appear to view the enormity of this universe, from man's perspective, as really that big of a deal. And why would he? I mean, yes, it displays his creativity, his power, his immense power, but as compared to the human body, or simply the human eye, a planet or a star is pretty basic. Should we be more amazed by a whole lot of planets and stars, or by the human eye and the human cell, DNA? So if God doesn't see the universe the way we do, then the question of why would God create something this immense and not populate multiple planets, well, kind of loses its bite. The better question is, why would he populate other planets? He's already populated one of them with the pinnacle of his creation. But of course, people ask something along the lines of, but God could populate other planets if he wanted to, couldn't he? And sure, God is God. The only limitation on God is that he can't cease being God. So he can't violate his own laws. He can't cede his power to any created being. He simply cannot not be God. So if he wanted to, or still wants to, create some sort of life for other planets, well, he could. Do we know if he did or didn't? Well, truthfully, no. There isn't a human alive who can say that with absolute certainty, because as humans, we aren't everywhere in the universe at the exact same time. In the entire known and unknown universe, visible and invisible, or whatever you want to say. What we do know is what's in the Bible. The Bible gives no indication that God created other life somewhere else. But at the same time, God is not obligated to tell us that, is he? And couldn't there be many creations? Many Bibles? Well, again, there could be. So, what do we know for sure? Well, we know the Trinity is the Trinity. So we have God the Father, who is Spirit. We have God the Holy Spirit, who is Spirit. Then we get into a bit of a sticky wicket. We have God the Son, Jesus, who is not Spirit. He's the God-man, resurrected God-man, fully God, but fully man. That limits what these other created civilizations could be when you really think about it. They would have to be 100% human, exactly like us. That's never how aliens are portrayed or thought of, but they would have to be, unless you believe to choose that Jesus is either, one, a shape-shifting, multi-incarnated, resurrected deity, or two, he only came to save humans and all those other alien civilizations were simply created to be destroyed. And does that mean hell, or does that mean annihilation, where they just blink out of existence? Of course, that assumes that they also all fell into sin, which it would be impossible for a created being not to. Or is sin different with different alien civilizations? And what happens when Revelation, when we find out that man's place is with God, which means Jesus, right? Do we have multiple heavens? And the big problem with saying that God could have created many other alien races is that the theology, as written about in our Bible, becomes at best very wonky. A number of things stated as fact start to sound shady and more like half-truths rather than true truth. The bottom line is that the Christian can only speculate that maybe there might be some alien life out there that God created, but they have to compromise the truth of the Bible in order to do so. The more logical choice is to believe that the creation was exactly as described in the book of Genesis, which means that humans are a unique creation of life on one planet out of all the planets. Now, onto the topic of if there were aliens, could they be visiting us? Well, for this, I'd highly recommend you either read the book Alien Intrusion by Gary Bates of Creation Ministries International, or creation.com, or watch the documentary of the same name. Bates and those in the documentary or book walk through all the claims, the encounters, and the science behind an alien making it to Earth to visit us. Boiled down, if aliens existed somewhere light years away from us, it's not possible, based on the laws of physics, for them to reach us, or for us to reach them. The speed and or life support systems would be impossible. The ability to protect a spacecraft at speeds at or near the speed of light is impossible. The probability of some life form light years away stumbling onto this tiny planet is approximately 0. The odds of that being surviving in our solar system is approximately 0. If you ignore all the things that would have to work or exist or happen in order to assume that we have been visited by an alien life form and look at the vastness of the universe only, then sure, how could it be that big without other life? But when you start factoring in, reality, if another race existed out there somewhere, it would never be able to visit us, and we'll never be able to visit them. So have we been visited by an alien race? No. Does Area 51 have alien craft, alien bodies, and alien technology? No, it doesn't. Did an alien orb carrying a social justice message fall from another planet, another solar system, another galaxy, onto the country of Columbia in the city of Booga, which was then translated via AI? Oh my, no, that's a hoax. What kind of hoax? Who perpetrated it? I have no idea, but it's a hoax, mark my words. And don't get me started on AI. AI did not interpret this. AI fabricated out of thin air what it determined we humans would have said it would read. AI is nothing but a glorified search engine with the unique ability to feed into our confirmation bias in a way Google never could. AI isn't interpreting anything, and it's not going to cure disease or create new clean energy sources or save humanity. Just not going to happen, but we'll allow it to do all sorts of destruction before we'll admit that maybe AI isn't what we've been told it is. Mark my words on that one. As Christians, our only option is to believe what we're told in the Bible. God created everything we see and don't see. He did it in 6 24-hour days. Man was the pinnacle of his creation. Man sinned. Through Adam, we all inherit sin nature, which dooms us to hell. Jesus came to earth, born as a human man, fully God, and lived a perfect life. He was brutally murdered, but rose again in a glorified human body, still fully man and fully God. He ascended as fully man, fully God, to heaven, which is where he is right now, awaiting the appointed time to come back and collect those who were elected to salvation before the first molecule was ever created. To believe in alien races forces us to, at the very best, bend our theology, twist the scriptures just a little bit, or outright deny them and believe in the unbelievably insane theory of evolution, denying God entirely. To believe that these alien beings that require us to compromise or deny our beliefs could have possibly visited us or even sent a social justice orb, hoping we'd have some way to translate it, means that not only do we have to deny our beliefs, but now we have to deny science and universal laws as well. The belief in aliens and alien visitation requires us to disbelieve all things and believe in nothing but fantasies. And 2/3 of Americans, including what would have to be a large percentage of professing Christians, believe in just such a fantasy. Sadly, that's the state of theology and the knowledge of the Bible that the majority of Christians have today. But that's another topic for another day. Back in the day, when I lived and worked in the great state of Alabama, I worked with a guy who I became very good friends with, someone who I probably should have kept in touch with, but you know how that goes, who used to use the joke on us after not being able to locate one of us for some reason, usually looking for us so that we could go have lunch. Where have you been? It's not so much me, but just look at, and then you fill in the blank with a name. He's been worried sick about you. Look at his eyes, all red and puffy. So yeah. Where the heck have you been? That's what you may be asking of me. Well, oh, what a year so far. Am I right? This year's been the most atypical year I have had in a very long time. Where to begin? First, my oldest niece got hitched. Yep, that's right. Back in March, she married a good man who thinks the world of her. Always wanted to try be a part of major events for my nieces and nephews. I was able to make all their high school graduations, and so far, 3 weddings, with one more to come at some point, to some man, all in God's perfect timing. Second, the kid, my own flesh and blood, my pride and joy. She looks nothing like me, but is me on the inside. Well, she graduated high school back in May. So with clubs and groups she was in, there were senior nights and graduation-y things at school, things for her youth group, etc., etc. Now, I knew I'd have family coming into town for just such as graduation, so a little prior to March, but mostly from March to the middle of May, I made the really great decision to install new kitchen cabinets, which turned into a full kitchen remodel and a remodel of the entryway and then the half bathroom and then the dining room. In short, I made really poor decisions. As it turns out, I about lost my sanity and I was exhausted. But I got it all done. I got it mostly done. There are still the finishing touches that need to be done. I'll get to them. If you could just kind of get off my back, I'd appreciate it. Now, I took my normal July 4th trip to see family. It was a little bit different this time. The oldest niece and her new husband, well, they were only able to come back home for a couple days. My youngest niece and my kid were both out on their own respective mission trips. Both of my nephews and their wives have new babies, one about 10 months old at the time, the other just a handful of weeks at that point, and it was great to see all of them. They're all doing a great job as parents, let me just say that. Other than that, we tried blowing up the backyard just like we do every year, shot off a lot of big fireworks, that was fun, and as always, we had a great time. My kid got rebaptized this year. We had a good discussion about how she had been baptized as a very young girl. Now, my theological view has since changed regarding salvation and baptism at an early age. I don't think that's a good idea anymore. I wish I had thought that then. But the reality, based on discussions I've had with her in the past at various times, is that she was saved, and she is being saved, and she will be saved at the end. So this baptism was done as a symbol of a rededication of her life to Christ that she had made a few years ago, and she wanted to do this before she went off to college. And look, I'm proud of where she is today. She's come through a lot of stuff, and although life isn't always easy, she's doing great and really seems to have a heart for God and for helping others. It's good to see. With regard to goals, well, my work and personal goals are in shambles. Work goals have been totally upended through no fault of mine. That's just kind of how things go sometimes. Personal goals, yeah, poof, gone. Reading, Bible reading, prayer, water, weight. I mean, some are better than others, but tracking has totally gone out the window with everything going on. I mean, it's just kind of been pointless trying to keep up with stuff. Now, is that a good excuse? Probably not, but it's the truth. Now, I've recently been trying to work back into some of the more important goals like Bible reading, prayer, and losing weight. Let's start with some core goals here. The bottom line is that this year is kind of a throwaway year with regard to goals. That's okay. It's happened in the past. It'll happen again in the future. And now coming up in days, moving my kid down to college. And then you turn around and we're starting to get into the holidays. But this is probably the largest event in my life this year. Well, old Dan has got himself a special someone. Now, I'm not going to say much about this, but Kayla and I have been dating for a little while, and I'll be honest, we matched pretty perfectly. She's a good Christian woman, probably the sweetest, kindest person in the history of people. We're both old enough and have had enough experiences to know what we're looking for, what's important, the red flags to look out for, and on and on. And because of that, things are going really well and moving very quickly. And at some point in the very near future, get ready, family, this will be taken to another and more permanent level. It's not funny, but it's interesting that both of us have been single for a good while. We've both gone through the time of looking and the time of not looking for someone. We've both gone through a period of praying for God to send someone, and then over time, we both kind of changed our prayers to praying for ourselves to be worthy of a future spouse, praying for whoever God had for us if He had someone for us. We both went through that transformation at kind of similar times, and that change of worldview, and not too overly long after that, God saw fit to bring us together. Now, I'm not saying that God was driving us, or I'll speak for me, driving me to understand how I should be praying, because I don't know that, and I will not be attributing motive to God, but I'm also not saying that. And that brings us to this podcast. Okay, my thought with this podcast. Although I've never expressed it, I've always kind of thought that I would do it until I couldn't, until I didn't have time, or for whatever reason I wasn't able to continue. And the one thing I always thought that could possibly cause me to not have the time to continue was a serious relationship and eventually marriage. Well, that time has come, a serious relationship leading to marriage in the not too distant future. And although I do really enjoy doing this, I also enjoy spending time with Kayla. Let's be honest, that's of much greater importance. But here's the thing. I don't want to say that I'm done with this. More that I'm going to put it on pause for now, I guess. I mean, I plan on continuing with the Reading with Dan segments. I'm not going to promise that, but that's my plan. That's not too difficult to keep up with. I'm going to keep the podcast up, the channel up in full, and potentially drop new episodes as I'm able. Just kind of have to see how things go. I know I've still got the rest of the Heidelberg Catechism to go through. I'd like to get that completed. Of course, there's our Being Berean segments, and let's not forget about Wounding Our Friends. I've got a couple dozen more articles of those just sitting there in a tab or a window with many tabs as it stands right now. So I don't want to just shut this thing down, just completely. But for the rest of this year, I want to try and get my important goals back on track. And unless something very unforeseen and unexpected happens, I'll also be adjusting my entire life and schedule soon. So this year has been and will continue to be one of change. Large changes. A lot of large changes. And trying to maintain a podcast to the standard that I've been trying to maintain, whether you could tell that or not, it just won't happen. Now, In 2026, I don't know. And that's why I'm going to keep the channel up and open. I'll continue to add some content as I am able to do so, and we'll just kind of go from there. I want to thank all of the faithful listeners, which includes my family. I pray for all of you, the listeners, all of you on a regular basis, for your joys, your fears, your sorrows, your needs, your faith walk, and I'll continue to do that. On whatever platform you're using, if you'd like to know when content drops, make sure you enable notifications. So I guess, rather than saying goodbye right now, I'll just say see you later. God bless, and if it's God's will, I'll be talking at you somewhere in the future. Well, we've reached the end of this episode of the Logical Christian Podcast. I know, I'm not happy about it either. If you found value in this podcast, like, rate, review, and share if you wouldn't mind. Don't forget to check the show notes for links and contact info. Against logic, there is no armor like ignorance. Lawrence J. Peter. If you abide in my word, you are truly my disciples, and you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free. Jesus. So stay in the word, stay logical, stay faithful, and until next time, God bless.